Welcome to Money Matters TV. My name is Paul Mitchell. I'm a commercial banker, and I'm your host for this show. Joining me on this show is my longtime co-host, James Chan. He has his own company. It's Asia Marketing and Management Company.
Thank
James,
you.
welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Good to see you again.
Good to see you again.
So, you've been a long-time consultant, and we were thinking about maybe talking for our audience a little bit about some of your experiences in consulting. And one of the toughest parts of people when they get involved in consulting is how do they determine how they get paid, how much they get paid, the method of getting paid, and that type of thing. It's a touchy subject.
Oh, it's not only touchy. A lot of people are unprepared for it. Actually, before I came over to this studio this afternoon, earlier in the morning, an ex-client of mine who was a very successful executive with the company, but he got downsized. I mean,
welcome to the club, sure,
right, yeah, right. And then, however, he worked in corporate America for so long, easily 25 to 30 years.
Wow.
Now he finds himself on his own. And now, of course, like most people, he wants to do consulting or being a contractor, being a freelance person, you know. And even though I respect him, I like him, but I can see he doesn't really know the fundamental. You don't just get a handshake, first of all, about charging. You have to tell people your time is worth something. They have to pay you something, or they have to issue you a letter, something.
Agreement, right? Compensation agreement,
it's
yes.
very important, and a lot of people don't even have the courage to even ask for it, thinking that if they ask, they are, in the words of my executive friend, they are not being trusting. See, that's a fear.
Oh, yeah.
So if you are my potential client, and if I, James Chan, is to ask you, Paul Mitchell, for an agreement, a letter of authorization, I might be afraid that I am saying to you, Paul, I don't trust you.
Yeah.
I told my friend it has nothing to do with trust.
Right.
Actually, contract is good, not for not really. Contracts are really not meant for honest people. They're meant for people who are not honest. You have something to bank on.
Well, it's transparency.
Yeah.
I mean, I can assume and you can assume and that type of thing. We'll just put it down in writing.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
One of the things I've run into is, so how long should such a contract agreement be? For example, I'll give you an example. I've had used over years a 2-pager. Sometimes the print got pretty small, even on 2 pages.
Yep.
But I had somebody I kind of worked with who were kind of like informal partners, if you will. And he came up with like a 22-pager.
I don't.
He said his wife was an attorney.
Right.
It was apparently to me, but she wasn't a business transaction attorney, just an attorney. Anyway, 22 pages. So he sent it to a prospect, and the prospect sent it back and says, I'm not going to sign the Bible. Looks like a legal tome of some kind. What's your experience?
My experience is two things I want to mention. Number one, I am not being negative on a lawyer drawn, very fine-tuned, elaborate.
This liability and that liability. If you do this, you do that.
Page, because just being a Microsoft subcontractor, and you are going to sign like a 60-page document. I mean, they exist, so I can't badmouth that. It's one. But in my experience, it's fact number 2, which is the most important one, the real one. I've lived through it for more than 3 decades. Short, simple English, stating what you do, how much you want, and asking for a signature, or maybe a purchase order. Very simple.
1 page, 2 pages?
Oh yeah. Oh, often fewer than 2 pages.
Okay.
If that's 1 page is good enough.
Sure.
I have a client that I've been working with for so long, I get superstitious. I don't even want to tell you how long. We began with maybe half a page of an agreement, and now it's just an email. My client would just send me an email. Oh, James, let's do another year. That's it. And it's not little money. So that's my experience. I've answered your question fully, but very concisely, because there aren't that many words.
And the other thing is, you may have a long contract that somebody does agree to sign.
And if they want to break it, they will still break it.
They have their attorney look at it. Exactly. If they're not going to pay you, they're not going to pay you.
However,
go chase them for 5 years.
I'm not beating on people who's having 15 page or 30 page. There might be situations where you need those. but no.
Okay, well, let's go back to the fundamentals then. So how much?
How much?
$50 an hour, $100 an hour? How do you do it? How should somebody do it? How should your friend be doing it? The one that you ran into that was big corporate America.
He doesn't know yet. I told him, okay.
How's he going to find out?
When the time comes, buy me a hamburger. You know, I'll sit down and let you know. First of all, a lot of people who start out being a service provider, that means they work for a company for a long time. They never had to go out and sell their services or sell themselves. Never. They only know of billing by the hour,
right?
Which by itself is not wrong.
Like a lawyer
yeah,
typically does. Yeah.
However, there's one thing that I would say 90% of the people who are new to providing services don't know. When they sell by the hour, they assume that they will be working as if they were an employee still at a company, day to day, 52 weeks in a year.
Same project, whatever.
Right. And I keep telling these people for years, because I give talks, you will be very lucky. Of about 2,000 hours we all have in a year, I already
Work
give
hours.
you
Yeah,
2 weeks of
40 hours a week.
vacation,
Right.
you
Yep.
know. About 2,000
Sure.
hours
Yep.
in a year. You will be extremely lucky if you can bill 1/3 of 2,000 hours, which happens to be something like 660.
Well, but then I would say, well, I'm on my own. Entrepreneurs work double that when you're on your own type of thing. You work at the week. You work, you know, you're 14-hour days.
It's easy for you to
work
say
7
that.
days a
Right,
week, you
right,
know,
yeah,
et cetera,
right,
et cetera.
Right. That's not such a bad idea. Even doubling doesn't guarantee, doesn't give you a good living.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't know it. And in a way, that is the downside, sort of billing by the hour. Billing by the hour is still a convention, but seasoned consultants, while also billing by the hour, will have other ways to bill clients, ways that are better in the long run, and ironically, more satisfying to both the consultant and the client. Of course, there are easily 2 other ways. The other way, other than hourly billing, is bill by the project.
Right.
You tell me what you want me to do. How long? 3 months, 6 weeks, and I'll give you a price.
Yeah.
You know, and so we come up with a schedule of payment.
Right.
You know.
So there are a lot of ways of skinning the cat. And, talk to some other people that have been in the consulting business before and that type of thing.
Billing by the project is actually a more advanced. It's like when we are in college, you take 101 economics, then you have 201. Billing by the project, I would consider a 201 level. It's a higher level, more sophisticated. Then my favorite is billing by retainer.
Yes.
Retainer defined in this case as a sum of money. You tell your client, yes, I'd like to work with you. Here's my proposal on what I can do for you. And my fee will be, and you give out just one number. And that number will be paid in the course of a year in 12 installments, equal installments. That's payment by retainer. That's my favorite. And it took me 15 years to understand the importance or the virtue
Well, I've got
of retainer.
I've got a challenge for you, James.
Okay.
Okay. I'm going to ask you to give some free advice to our audience.
Yes, that
No
would be
retainer,
fine.
no hourly, no
Fine,
nothing.
Fine. Sometimes in life, the good things that we do come back as boons. That's the meaning of karma. So don't worry. Use me, abuse me. You know, just like what's the singer Anne Lennox or Anna Lennox, Eurythmics. Some people like to abuse you. Some people like to be abused by you.
Well,
Keep
we like
going.
to be. Our audience likes to be educated. So
Good.
Nancy Norman of Philadelphia asks, what are good products to sell in China? And you are the Chinese selling to China expert. That's been your business for decades. You're the right person, I think, to address that question.
Okay. Since 1980, I've been selling American-made products and services to China. And good products actually fall into 2 categories. The first category would be products that China is in shortage of. In other words, China lacks it for whatever reason, like soybeans. Chinese sometimes buy humongous amounts of soybean. They also buy coal, even though China produces coal. And in fact, a couple of days ago, the New York Times had an article with easily 6 pictures of products, and soybeans is one, sorghum is another, and also like milk. It's not like China cannot produce milk, but for whatever reason, enough citizens in China want milk produced in the West. So that's one aspect. If you know China is short of something, those are good products. However,
and it doesn't take a lot to be short, because you've got how many billion of people in China?
1.4. And then then the other category will be things that the Chinese do not do well. China doesn't make everything. There are certain things that the Chinese, as of now, cannot do very well. They can pirate, they can copy you, they can do whatever, they can copy your grandmother, you can't stop them. However, your grandmother has something special, which is, she's your grandmother. Not anybody's grandmother. She has something, like a brand, like a specialty. So I've been selling things like precision engineered springs, little springs that can help you raise your antenna when you go onto Mars.
So not the finished product, but a component.
A component, but it doesn't matter. Most likely it will be a component, because the finished products would be just too, like you buy a turbine, a gas turbine. They'll assemble the turbines, but like an Apple iPhone. Of course, the Chinese make iPhones, but there are many. An iPhone may have a couple of hundred components, little things here and there. Then China sources these components, precision components, which are specialty products that the Chinese don't do well. I think I have answered that question very well. Two categories. Whatever China is short of, focus your energy. Whatever China cannot do well, that's your opportunity.
So there are good opportunities. Thank you, James. Very good. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
So if the other members of their audience would like to ask a question of Money Matters TV, here's how to send your questions in.
You can have your questions answered on Money Matters. Please go to our website, money-matterstv.com. On our homepage, click on the banner on the right that says Send Us Your Questions. While you're on our website, you can find information about our host and guests, as well as show notes and links about this show and past shows. Money Matters is also available as a podcast on iTunes and Stitcher, so you can listen to Money Matters while you're on the go. That website address, again, is money, M-O-N-E-Y, -matters, M-A-T-T-E-R-S, TV.com.
Welcome back to the show. Now I have the pleasure of introducing our special guest for this show, David Weiman. David, good to meet you.
Real pleasure to be here.
You have your own consulting company, Weiman Consulting, I understand?
Yes.
And you have you're a Dr. Weiman, I should say. You have a doctorate degree. And what kind of specialty would that be in?
The doctorate is in clinical psychology, but it's really applied to the world of business. So I do talent assessment of senior executives, executive coaching work, and leadership development consulting.
And you've been on the show a few times before, I understand.
Yeah, more than a six-pack, I think.
Do you roughly remember when you did your first one with Money Matters?
I don't, but I remember I was scared and nervous.
Yeah, the first time is always your maiden trial. Yeah, that's good, yeah. But I'm fascinated by what you do, particularly, in terms of the psychology of saving and investing. I think it's really immensely interesting, because everybody has to deal with it, whether or the people who are very smart and people who are clueless.
I think it really, it kind of follows on in a way to what you were just talking about earlier, because all of these financial decisions in life are truly emotional. Whether it's somebody who's trying to figure out, about buying a house, buying a car, investing in something, or how much to charge. Because even that relates in some way to what we feel we're worth. And so it really is fascinating.
Hey, but I have to stop you, David. It is emotional. I've always thought so. But I'm also arguing a lot of people do not admit it. They don't admit it to you, the professional, to me. They know it's emotional. They may know. Some people don't even know. But even if they did know, I would argue they wouldn't want to say it to your face. It's an emotional. Oh, David, I'm being emotional. I'm going to tell you, I don't like red cars, red colored cars. I hate them.
I have no self-discipline. I'm not a business person.
Seems like the word emotion conjures up weakness, vulnerability, total exposure. Like, why don't you stab me now?
And it's interesting, because some of the things that we commit to financially are the biggest things we commit to in life. And that emotional part, whether it's conscious or unconscious, I agree with you. I think people feel like they want to show I'm completely logical about this. I weighed the pros and cons. This is the best car, and it happens to be red and a convertible. But yeah, I think you're
and
right.
I graduated #1 in my class. Yeah, right. I'm smart. Yeah, right. Yeah, right. Get ready.
Nothing good usually comes after someone says that. I graduated #1 in my class.
Let's not get crazy about it. By the way, about scam artists, con men, con women. See, the psychology of saving and investing is just such a fertile field for scammers, for bad people.
Especially if banks are paying 0.75% interest on your savings account.
3/4. You're kidding.
What are you going to do with
Close
that?
to zero. Right. So how do people tell the audience what is 1 or 2 rules of thumb to smell out a con man, versus a straight shooter?
I think that the difference between a financial professional who's interested in teaching someone is you start to get that feeling that you're learning something from them. The scam artist, you feel like you're being told a story. So it's entertaining. They often tell stories that play on your emotions about things. Maybe they say, hey, I was like you, I didn't have anything, and then I figured out how to buy and flip homes. And now I have all this stuff. I used to be just like you. And they start telling a story, so we're somewhat susceptible to that because it's when we're told stories from the time that we're little. In fact, some of the first things that kids say to their parents is to tell me a story. And there's a real interesting bond there between a parent and a child over that. So when someone starts saying, let me tell you a story about how I did this, we tend to relax a little bit. That filter, the warning signs, the radar starts to go dark, and we don't pay as much attention to it. So that's one thing. I think the second thing is, if you feel like you're being pressured to make a decision, there is no wise financial decision you can make for the long term that you should feel like if you don't make it in the next 5 minutes, you're going to lose this opportunity. And they're playing on a psychological principle of persuasion called scarcity. Which is, if you don't do it now, it's going to disappear. So if you start to feel that pressure, that's actually a warning sign that you should end that conversation and talk to somebody that you trust to suss that out.
This is an extremely useful and practical method, tool, tactic. I mean, not tactic, but it's. I think people should listen to this dearly because a minor example. Decades ago, I bought a CD for $300 because a guy who was extremely good in selling mailing list CDs. I mean, he was really good. He claimed that he worked at IBM for a long time, and he was a killer salesman. But it was exactly that kind of like, buy now, it's gone, or something. It's just, I felt that. I wish I had listened to you at that moment.
Well, I think
I felt desperate.
And you just used that term, I felt. And so I think that relates to what you said earlier, which is it has nothing to do with intelligence why people get sucked into scams. In fact, if they maybe were more in touch with that emotional side, what they need that they're not getting, what they feel they deserve that they haven't been paid, I think they'd be a little less susceptible to it because it is the feeling part that gets bypassed, which is why some very intelligent people get scammed. I think in the book The Millionaire Next Door, they point out, the authors point out that physicians are often susceptible to this, and their explanation for why they get scammed in financial scams is at least according to the book, this isn't my point of view, but that physicians tend to trust the intelligence and expertise of other people. So they're less likely to really probe in and start reading the documents and get wise about what they're getting into. And I think, and so that's the emotional part overriding the intellectual part there.
Plus, physicians are not street smart because they don't fight in the street daily. They're not. They don't dance and mingle with.
And that mingling is what clues us in when we have that experience of interacting with people in that real business world. We can we recognize the patterns and stories that don't make sense. And when they don't make sense, that's another sign that what's going on here? Like what this person said, one thing doesn't follow the other.
I want to, sorry.
I was say, has there been any kind of like evolution in scams? I mean, you've been in this psychological business
Great idea.
for decades. 20 years ago, certain kinds of scams were common or commonplace. Now they've advanced or something else now. Maybe something else the last 3 months. Is there any kind of evolution like that? Different trends?
Well, what tends to happen now is the technology is able to make, like, look, back in the old days, if you wanted to fake a check, you almost had to be an artist to do it, right? I mean, you had to be really good at drawing, copying signatures, washing the check.
That's right.
It was an art form. Now, with a computer, you can make a check probably in 3 minutes that somebody would accept. And I think there's a lot more information coming at people. They hear more wild stories, both positive and negative, about somebody making a huge amount of money or losing a huge amount of money. And I think that that's, again, where smart people, if they see something come through their email that looks official, as I say, it looks official and feels judicial, that also tends to bypass the censor that would normally say, wait a second, this doesn't even look real.
Yeah, why me? Right.
Yeah, right. So I think that that's another, the way that personalization is used now, the mimicking of phone numbers. So you see a number pop up and it looks like it's somebody that you know.
I got it from Google, but if I
Yeah.
click on it, it says Joe Smith at DEN or something.
Exactly. So,
I have a statistic to throw at you, which is related to the psychology of saving, well, mostly investing and scamming people. Believe it or not, I struggled for 17 years to finish Herman Melville's tiny little book, The Confidence Man, Con Man. It's where I think the word comes from. A thin book, extremely difficult to read because of the way it's written.
right.
Herman, I think he was trying to torture American citizens. But in that book, cut to the chase, 1/3 of people are successful. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Like if the con man persists, he's going to grab 1/3 of the market. Per 100 people, 33 of them are going to be very successful. Is it true that in the world of scam artists, that figure, 1/3, 1/3 is, it's like 1/3 of people may buy whatever you do, whatever theory, whatever crock of whatever that you can come up with, they will buy.
I'm a big believer in these sort of rules of thumb, and although I don't have any evidence or data around that, it certainly makes sense that, I mean, if you just look at the normal curve, you might even think the number's a little bit higher, that the number of people who could be drawn in by something. And I think that it relates to the idea that the scam artists, particularly, to take something that doesn't belong to you, generally requires that you don't have a conscience. And if you don't have a conscience, the word for that kind of person's a sociopath. They tend to be phenomenally charming people. And so there is something about how, because they lack that barrier that some of us have to just conversing with strangers, for example, they don't have that, and they can establish rapport real quickly, and then they can once they get in the operating system, they can mess around in there.
And they're persistent, they persevere. I mean, they work hard. I'm
They
not
do.
saying that con man.
I've often, I was saying to somebody earlier today, like, if this person I knew who was involved in like the scam they were trying out, if they just went legit, they'd be really wealthy because they have an incredible work ethic.
But that's beside the point, really. To a con man, that's beside the
Oh,
point.
yeah, they're not interested in
they're
making
not
money the
interested.
old-fashioned
No.
way.
Yeah. So being smart doesn't mean you're good. The two are kind of not necessarily related.
Right,
It's like a
right.
Venn diagram.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, I think the technology aspect is also interesting because you can hit a lot more than 100 people these days to get 30. You could hit 10,000,
Right.
and you still get maybe 30, which is this percent.
Right.
But there's
Yeah.
your 30 still. That's all you're
yeah.
really interested in, getting
yeah.
those few to really
Right.
cave into you.
And I'd say even the ones who have heard of a scam before, like somebody saying, I want to deposit this check in your account, and then if you send me this money back, you
Yes.
keep the rest as a commission or
Right, right.
retainer.
Right.
People are very familiar with that scam. They
Yep.
still fall for it, even the ones who've heard of
I
it before.
can't
Yes.
understand why. Why do people fall for it even though they have heard about it? Maybe they actually suffer from it before. They may still do it.
Yeah,
I think.
I think they do it because they're desperate for some kind of financial relief, and it sounds logical to them. Well, what bad could happen? I get the check, it goes into my bank, and it clears. They don't know that it takes several days, even after it appears in the account,
I see.
for it to have actually
Right.
cleared. And
Right.
when it gets yanked back, that's where they get scammed from having paid
As
the
a
money.
banker, I can speak to that. That
It
is,
is-
you get availability in a day or 2 or 3 days, even something like that. Okay, it doesn't mean that it's a good check.
Correct.
But
If it's a
the
bad
average
check,
person
it's
doesn't
going
know
to
that,
take
yeah.
a week or more to find out the hard
Correct,
way.
correct.
In the meantime, like I said, the transaction has otherwise been completed and all. And I even talked to one of the banks I worked with a few years ago. I talked to the security people in terms of, what kind of liability do customers have when things go wrong with their account and all. And the first thing they said, well, they got to read the fine print.
Wow.
Yow.
Yeah. Right.
Yow,
yeah. Right. Yeah.
So that's part of it.
Psychologically, why are some people more willing to take risks versus others?
I love this concept of the risk meter that each person has inside of them. The personal finance guru Dave Ramsey refers to this. And I think there's some people who their risk meter is super sensitive, and when the idea of parting with their money for something they don't completely understand or completely don't trust is not attractive to them. So that's the kind of person who puts their money in an interest-bearing account instead of investing in mutual funds, for example, because they don't understand it, they're not sure what's going to happen to it. And then I think people at the other end of the spectrum are attracted to the idea of like gambling. Well, I'm going to put my chips down and see what happens. And I think a lot of that has to do with how we were trained and taught about money as children. So you have people who save and you have people who spend. Even in a marriage sometimes, you have one partner who's great at offense, they're good at bringing the money in, and the other person has to be there to protect it, because if not, that money would just pass through. So I think even just how someone views how money comes into their life, I think is interesting. Because there's people who view it as plentiful, and if I lose some, that's okay.
There's always more, right, yeah.
There's always more, and I think there's people who have a sense of scarcity around it. So I
It
think
sounds
that
like, sounds like
helps
people
determine risk.
should, if you're talking about money issues, talk to somebody else, hopefully somebody that's somewhat objective, 2 or 3 people, get some different perspectives and that type of thing.
Yeah.
And give yourself some time to kind of like cool it down a little bit.
And talk to people who have a different approach than you. So if you tend to be a spender, talk to a saver. If you tend to be emotional, talk to a logical person.
Great advice.
Yeah.
David, we have to wrap up the show and all. Really appreciate you
My
coming on
pleasure.
the show. Some great information, great advice.
We hope to see you again.
Yes,
Indeed.
indeed.
Yeah, thank
Maybe
you.
it's your umpteenth time on Money Matters TV. You did a great show. Appreciate it very much.
My pleasure.
So I'd like to also just mention to our audience that our next guest will be Mary Doherty of Nicole Miller, Philadelphia. That's it's a boutique store. It's been around for decades. It's quite a success story for an entrepreneur. So just remember on this show that your money matters.